Hi there, everybody. It's Chris from Rocket Cat coming to you from Studio D in Shorewood, Wisconsin, otherwise known as my bedroom. Yes, because much like many of you, one day I was at my studio at the office and they said to me, you got to leave and you're probably not going to be able to come back anytime soon. And I grabbed a bunch of gear and stuff, anything I could carry, and headed out the door and found a desk in my garage, brought it up to the bedroom, and here I am. Yeah, we're in a really crazy and horrible time right now. We've got our healthcare industry in distress, healthcare workers having to re-sanitize and re-clean their personal protection equipment many more times than it was rated for. Small businesses being decimated by closures. We've got political factionizing and unrest. Some of it horribly misguided, all this kind of stuff going on right now. What I'm doing here right now, this is on a different level, right? That is the really important stuff. But, for us as artists, all of our gigs got canceled, right? As a rock band, all of our gigs got canceled and we can't get together and, rehearse or work on material or the things that we found really added a lot of joy into our lives and sustained us. And we know that there's a lot of folks out there in the independent industry, particularly locally, who their livelihood is being musicians, and they're suffering horribly right now. So I'm making this in hopes that we can put together a little package here for some funding, and Rocket Cat's going to give back to the community a bit so we can help some of those folks out, those folks who, really shown us the way and inspired us over the time. And maybe, give them some inspiration for a project that's neat to do and can bring you closer to an audience and help out those other people who need some joy in their lives. We thought we'd kick this off with a little project of our own, just in order to engage us and keep us creatively flowing and try to mitigate some of that tension that we're feeling by not being together and playing together. Very much like the things that we've seen on the internet, the Jimmy Fallon squares and that sort of stuff, the ensemble pieces, and get together. It'd be a good project, a good engagement for us to do. I also think that it might be something that a lot of other folks would like to engage in or can find some solace in creating a project like this. And it also helps you connect with audience then who are missing it. Yeah, people who can't go to the shows, maybe they'll get a little joy. At least that's what we're hoping. Actually, we're hoping that we can give some financial support to those independent artists that have inspired us so much in Milwaukee, for sure. So we decided to engage in our own little performance rehearsal type remote video. And I'm making this so that, just showing you how we did it, so that in the event that you want to give this a go, because you might be in the same boat, you want to have the outlet, you want to play with your band, you want to do other things, but you can't really do it. This is a stopgap, it might mitigate some of the stress. And, there's technology involved, I won't lie. It's not the simplest of processes, especially if you want to do something that's got a level of quality to it. But, it's doable. It's possible. I also didn't have much of a background in how to do this, but, my day job requires me to hang out with voice actors and record voice actors and things like that. So I have an understanding of how, like, podcasting works, particularly high-end podcasting, how that works. So I used those principles in order to put this project together. All that said, let me take a look at the process. First of all, I should note here that I'm going to go through the brutal truth of all of this. It's going to be, anything that happened behind the scenes here, anything that's maybe studio trickery, I'm going to demonstrate here. This is going on everywhere. The things that you see on the internet where there's 4 people playing at once or an orchestra playing at once, they're not actually playing together. It's not possible given the technology that we have available right now. There's too much latency in communication, too much difference, delays, and things like that to actually play together. Maybe this technology exists. I don't have it. We don't have access to it. But in most cases, I think almost all cases, they're not playing together. The Roots and Jimmy Fallon and Sting, they did not play that song together. They each did their parts individually and they got comped together, composited together later on. Knowing that, the key here is to have some sort of guide, yeah, so that everybody is following the same guide, and then we sync them up later on. We decided to work with our song Gold from the 2015 EP Radiant Transmission. Actually, I think it was released in 2016, but we recorded it in 2015. And when we recorded the song, we did it at Howell Street Studios with Shane Hochstetler managing the mixing and the engineering. It was a really fantastic time, super important learning experience for me and my bandmates as well. And he's so good at what he does, and he's so great at capturing the essence and the moment of a band. So when we recorded this song, all four of us were in the room, and we played it straight through, and we used that as the guide to move forward from that point. Once we had that, then everything else was based upon that initial recording. Overdubs, adds, complete replacements, whatever we did was from that point. We did not play with a metronome. We played it just regular, normal, so there was no synchronization to it, and as such, Gold drifts around tempo wise. It shifts, basically it's at about 125 beats per minute, but it's got a lot of swing in it too. It's shifty and moves, there's a lot of push and pull in the song. We could play along with that guide track, but I think it would be difficult for us. A couple of reasons for that. First of all, our original drummer, Tim, he left the band shortly after we recorded the EP. And when we got a new drummer, when Steve Voris joined us, Steve would put headphones in with his iPhone and run a metronome, so that he was always playing with a metronome. When this happened, it was sort of an opening of a box. First of all, we found out as a band we were getting tighter and much more precise, which was, pretty exciting at the time. It was very, very cool. But it also then led us into the world where if we're going to be on the metronome all the time, now only Steve's hearing it, but he's playing to it, then the possibility of us triggering samples, doing backing tracks, all that stuff becomes a possibility. And we have a fair amount of keyboard and synth textures on our songs. It's something that we like to do. So that allowed us to reintroduce those back into a live performance. But we are playing to a metronome. When you see Rocket Cat, there's the drummer, it's going tick, 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 tick in his headphones. Just a little rant here, by the way. I know there's a lot of controversy about this. A lot of controversy about bands playing with metronomes and bands using backing tracks and all that kind of stuff. First of all, the controversy number one is that people think that it is a cop-out and that it makes your life easier. I can tell you firsthand, it does not make your life easier. It makes your life harder, considerably harder to be on the clock, to be playing with a metronome. First of all, you have to be that much more precise about everything you do, and everything you do has to be completely consistent. So you end up feeling into the detail. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't work around, and you can't float around. And in a lot of ways there's some freedom there, but you have to be very precise. So extremely professional and disciplined about your playing. It also allows us to bring in things like synth textures and samples that we would have to add a member of the band in order to do. And if we add a fifth member to the band, first of all, they might mess with the chemistry, and we don't want to do that. But hey, it's hard enough to schedule 4 people together, let alone 5. So it becomes even like a logistics issue. So we don't need to do that. We're not going to do that, but we want to present the songs as we envisioned and crafted them live as much as we can. So we're going to play with the metronome. You're going to hear backing tracks, and you're going to hear samples or whatever else we want to have going on. We can play the songs without that. We know that, but we can play them with it too, and we like it. At a big, arena size level, obviously they're synchronizing video to it. There's, who knows, they might do a dance number where they're not playing their instruments at all and stuff. That's theater, right? That's a different thing than Rocket Cat playing down at the ale house or whatever, right? Yeah. So something else there, but don't hack on people for playing with metronomes. That's all I'm saying. And it's opinion. You can have your own opinion, but it's more difficult. If you haven't done it, you will find it to be more difficult. Just the prep work in alone and establishing the technology and setting that all up and the rehearsal involved with that kind of stuff. It's a big deal. Okay, rant's over. Because we've been playing Gold forever on a metronome now, it made sense to have that synced to that click track. And that would allow us to each play and take those audio components later and line them all up. Exactly. So that works to our advantage. Now we could all each play with a metronome going at 125 beats per minute, and we could each play our parts all the way through the song, but that's not very fun. It's not very interesting, and I think the performances end up being kind of uninspired. So let's go ahead and use an actual track of Gold for us to play along with. I went and looked for rehearsal tracks and live recordings of it so that I could use that, which have already been locked to that metronome. I couldn't find anything that was usable. So I had to go back to Radiant Transmission, to the original track with all of its drifting tempo. And we might have been able to play along with that, but I think it would have been difficult for us to follow that drift again. At the time we were doing great with it, but now I don't know if that would have been the case. My trick then is to take this track and match it all up so that everything is on the metronome, so that when the snare hits on 2 and 4, that it matches the metronome 2 and 4. Come on over here to Ableton Live. This is my digital audio workstation of choice for doing this kind of work, and it's really good at it. That's why. And I do a lot of audio editing in Ableton just because I think it's a very clean digital audio workstation with good workflow and quick results. But really, it does this really well, stretching and pulling and matching music to a particular beat. The top channel here, channel 1, this is the track of Gold from Radiant Transmission that I matched to the metronome. The second track is the track before it was matched. If I zoom in here a bit, so you can see we begin the song, everything starts on 1, that's all good, and already we start to drift. So I'm comparing this waveform to this waveform, and by this point we're off quite a ways from the original tempo. We start to move a little further down the line, and that's all of a sudden, oh yeah, we were back a little bit, so we're closer. You can see the drift happening. This one's almost right on, but we move along the line here, and now these beats are faster than those beats. That's what we wanted to fix. So down here in the editor, you can see Ableton installs these little markers that attach to transients. Transients being let's say a key point. Very often a snare hit, something that's identified as a percussive moment. These allow you to take a particular moment of audio and push and pull it around. So right here, for instance, if I know this is a downbeat, and it's the downbeat here from measure 7, and it's off over here, that's going to be bad. So I can just go boop, and it goes right into its exact place. And I was fairly aggressive about doing this. You can see there's lots of markers. That's every time I pushed or pulled something, that one of those yellow markers was made. This is much more than I would normally want to do. In fact, my advice about doing this kind of work would be do only as many as you absolutely need. If there are parts of the song that drift a little bit, let them drift. If they start to get off, by enough to cause a problem, then fix them. But otherwise, let the song be as natural as possible. Once I had that track, so now we are synced up with the metronome. I'll play it back here so you can hear it. And give her a start off, you can hear what happens. So that's the track on the metronome. The original track, if I give that a playback, you'll hear it drift right away. So you can kind of hear it coming back and forth with the metronome and out of time with the metronome. It's just the push of the pull of the band is how we were playing it at that point. And this removes that anomaly from there. Once I had the track synchronized to a metronome, then I exported it from Live and moved it over into Logic for the next process. The first track is simply a metronome track. It's just a MIDI track triggering a metronome. And I wanted to do this because, first of all, it is a metronome sound that we're accustomed to, used to using, so that's nice. And then the second thing is that I can take the accents off of the downbeat, so it's just a standard little tick there, standard beep. There's no accents on any of it. That's kind of important with a song like Gold, because the verses are in 7, and so if you have a metronome that has accents on, the downbeat of a 4/4 measure, then once you start getting into 7, you end up having the accent on the second beat of the next measure, and it gets weird to listen to. It's kind of cool actually, but it gets a little difficult to deal with. And you can of course make 7/4 measures in Live or in Logic, but I didn't have to go through that process, and all we want is that standard click, that standard metronome. I added in the beat match track and set that back. I usually set these back 2 bars so that we have 2 bars of count in, right? 2 bars of just click, and then the song starts. This also allowed me to attenuate the level of the metronome versus the level of the guide track. I bounced this out, rendered it out of Logic, those 2 tracks mixed together, and sent one to each member of the band. They, at their own locations, then set up a camera and set up a digital audio workstation in order to record themselves, and recorded the audio while the camera was running on them. That way, now we have a solid recording of the audio and a documented video of that moment. It was important to do those things at the same time. Most of that video is done by smartphones. Frankly, we don't have any fancy cameras, and you can probably see like colors. I'm sure my lighting's all screwed up and things are going back and forth. So the technology for our camera capture is not great. On the other hand, I don't know, if you get it too good and too polished, then it starts to look like something else, and it's not as personal as these things have felt. So having the camera is not so great, I think, adds to the authenticity of what's going on. For me, recording the guitars, I recorded it directly right back into Logic using the same session, and my guitar sound is coming directly from my Helix Line 6 floorboard. I'm not using my amplifier, I'm using an amp and emulation in the floorboard, and it's coming direct out of there, so there's no extraneous sound. I know that my kid is playing cello right now, and you can probably hear that in the background, so that didn't happen. It's coming direct out of my floorboard. Dave did a similar situation, recorded direct out of his bass amplifier, which has a direct out, into his computer, into probably Reaper, is Dave's digital audio workstation of choice, so I imagine he used that. Suzanne and Julian, they had a little bit of a bigger problem in that they're having to use live microphones, for the vocals and the drum kit. That means that whatever ambience is in the room is going to be part of what they captured. I think both of them used Logic as well to do the captures. Suzanne used looked like her Sennheiser microphone right there, which does a pretty clean capture, and frankly, given that she's standing in the middle of her living room, it sounds pretty good. The capture is nice. Julian, I don't know how he did his, but he doesn't have a bunch of drum mics, and we don't have access to a studio to do it. So I think it's just 1, maybe 2 mics, and it's all recorded into one mix. There's only 1 channel of drums in these mixes that you hear. It was all together as one thing. So basically, they're all just playing along with that guide track while having video recorded, and they're recording what they're playing. We did this. I did 3 takes, right? So I played the song through 3 times straight. Dave did 1. He's got 1 take. That's Dave. He's Dave, 1 take Dave. Suzanne did 2 vocal tracks, and Julian did 2 drum tracks. Played it all the way through. They sent those tracks back to me. And by the way, we're using Google Drive to do all this transferring of files, and the video files especially get very large, so your internet has to be somewhat robust. And in fact, at one point, one of us did have to get a major internet upgrade in order to make this a doable process. And that happened, and it was very cool. Once the tracks all came back to me, I put them all into Logic, into this session here, and matched them all up with the guide track and the metronome. So if I turn on, let's see, we can turn on the guitars here. We can hear the guide track, the metronome, and the guitars. And if I turn off the reference track here, the guide track, then you'll hear just the guitar and the metronome. Turn on the bass, hear that. This is pretty cool because Dave's got a little distortion effect on his bass, which you don't really hear it when it's normally in the mix, but it adds this little edge to it, little thickness to it, which I think is very nice. And we got vocal line.
Find me underneath the lights. You will find me.
And we got some drums here. We'll do drums too. So if I put those things all together, we can hear what the raw, unmixed version of it was like. Cool. A couple of bits of note here. Studio trickery, right? I did 3 takes, right? You can see where the blue regions are here. I'm comping the 3 takes together. So what you were hearing is not one take all the way through. It's a composite of the 3. And here, take 3. This is take 3, take 2, take 1. Take 3, I like the beginning of it, but then I got to this second part here where something I didn't like about it. You know, what it was, I don't remember. It looks to me kind of like maybe I didn't hit the downbeat correctly, just looking at the waveform. Or it was weak or something. But I liked my version of it from take 1, you know. So I went with that instead. But then back to take 3 for a while. And then, oh yeah, this, and maybe I was a little bit behind the beat here. It almost looks like it's a little shy at that point, but this one's right on. So yeah, let's use that one there from take 1 back to take 3. Here's something from take 2. You can hear what that sounds like. You can't tell the difference. Yeah, so over the course of that little phrase, there was 3 different audio files. But, you know, it was just me fixing, just a little fix, just a little change. And, you know, who knows why I did that? I know why I did this one. This is the shimmery guitar part, is that if this is a time-based effect, and if you don't hit it exactly right when you get going with it, you can't get the downbeat to trigger at this next point. It's hard to explain. It's this whooshy thing. And I know I got a nice positive one right here, but I didn't get it there. But the timing is better on this one. So that's the thing I was looking for right there, was the wah. And then I fussed with it at the end a little bit. I took the 2 vocal tracks, and I think there was one phrase in here where there was a little bit of a bobbled word. Yeah, just, you know, Suzanne got a little tongue-tied or something, and so I just replaced that with something from the second take. That was all I did with that one. Yeah, I did end up punching in Julian's, moving quite a bit around his, but that actually comes later because Julian did different fills at different times. He didn't play it, you know, straight. You know, when you're a drummer, that's cool. You know, improvise your fills here and there and change them. But I wanted it to match up with the video I wanted to use, so I had to pick the drum track that was going to match the video. So I did some of that there. Dave, I think there is one moment in here. I think Dave did some work on it before he sent me the file, but it's pretty funny. There's one section where he's probably going to hate this that I'm telling you this, but where he's playing a bass line and he does something a little different, just a little fill piece. But when one of those notes happens, he's going like this, or pushing his glasses or something. So like you hear him pluck a note, but he's got his finger up here, and that didn't make sense. So, just the brutal truth that there is a little backstage behind the scenes trickery going on. After I had everything synced up, I sent the tracks over to Dave so he could mix the song. While that was going on, I rendered out a portion of this and brought it into Adobe Premiere. This is a pro level video editor, and I realize that many people don't have access to it. I think that the things that I did could be accomplished in something like iMovie. It would be a little more painful for sure. And, I'm not entirely sure how you'd go about it, but I think it would be difficult, but I think it's possible. Really what I wanted to do required a lot of cuts and a lot of resizing and a lot of cropping of video. And this program works really well for this. It's not my favorite program by all means, and I'm not even particularly good at it, but I understand enough how it works that it's going to get the job done and be the best tool that I have for it. So I brought that audio in, and it was just the no drums in it, and I have it right here, I think. So the track right from Logic that we just looked at. I then took all of the video clips that were made and synchronized those up to that guide. I did this in a variety of different ways. In the case of drums, I can match it up to the sound of the click that's in that guide track. I always have visual information, so I can match up where people's fingers are, or where Suzanne's mouth was at the time forming the word, all that kind of stuff. In the case of the guitar tracks, those were actually kind of easy, because my camera was recording the sound that was in the room at the time I was recording the guitar into the computer. So you get this sound. The camera audio is pretty useful. It's kind of funny to listen to, because you can hear my kid playing cello in the background. That big clacky sound is me stepping on the foot switches to change the patch effects, change the guitar sound. There's my foot tapping, all sorts of stuff. I don't know why those clacky sounds are so resonant. The foot switches on the floorboard don't sound like that, yeah. But since I was recording direct out of the Helix unit, it was all closed. None of that extraneous sound was going to get to the recording. But what I do have then is the sound of me playing the guitar, acoustically, and I was able to match that up then with the guide track. So I went through that process for every bit of video and every take of video that I had. And this is kind of the raw file here. You can see that's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 video tracks. They all had, audio of some kind that came with them. And I've discarded most of it now. Once Dave finished the mix, I took that and injected that into the video session here and synchronized it to the track I had used first. And that's really just a matter of pushing and pulling the clips around. You can hear the things. First of all, they sound like they're getting out of phase, and then they sound like they're echoing. And I'll just as I play both tracks, I'll bougie this one back and forth a few frames, and you can start to hear it phasing and stuff. It's actually kind of a cool effect, but not what we wanted. So now that we got the phasing. And then when you get it in just the right place, or as close as the frame adjustment will allow us to do, you can hear it. All of a sudden, everything just sort of goes whoop, and it cleans up, and you have it well synchronized at that point. I also have the clicks at the very beginning here, which then are the little counting clicks, nice to work with. You can hear the reverb that Dave put on the entire session resonating through those opening counting clicks. That's kind of cool. Once all the components were in place, then the next choice is about how do we make something compelling. We've all seen now these videos where they show boxes, cameras of everybody who's in the band playing. So I felt like I did make one of those. So we have a video here that's just us playing in the 4 boxes. But that's fun to look at for about 5 seconds, and then it gets kind of boring after that. So let's find a way to make it a little more compelling. So I started to look at places in the song where things were going to be featured, where there was a vocal line or somebody was making a funny face. There's a little guitar and bass interplay, and maybe zoom in on those parts, feature things, and put things away. I started with sort of a neutral state of that 4-corner look, and then broke out of that and pushed back into it. I also added in a camera shot of my floorboard. I had a second camera going while I was recording me playing it, and because I thought it was kind of interesting or fun to watch my foot go hit the foot switches. And there's some strange patch changes in this song, so I thought, well, why not put that in there? It might be something fun to look at. Pretty much all of the cuts are on downbeats. Occasionally there might be one that's on a different beat, but that tends to feel good as far as the editing is concerned. I tried to create threads through which most of the song has vocals to it. Most of it has a vocal line. So Suzanne's on the screen a lot, but might turn into a small box on the side while things change around that vocal. I think that's a pretty good mechanism for keeping interest. I tried to do a couple of silly things. I know there's one section here where we're all stacked up, so it's like we're each a different part of one body, doing things like that. Whatever I could figure out to make it compelling. Oh, and then we have this section in the song that has little sample playback of a voiceover. And I thought, well, it'll be fun if I just trigger the samples live, my finger pushing the trigger buttons on the keyboard. So I added that in. So, much like you could do this performance live with those samples, that's certainly the way that Geddy Lee would do it. Hit the button with his foot every time he wanted the little words to go by. And then, of course, at the very end, you always got to do this. So people don't expect this to happen when they're doing the camera shots here, but each one of them does something a little goofy. Right? Dave puts his hands on his face, and we see Julian reach for the camera. Yeah, so I set us all in freeze frame. And then, boop, and we go out with that camera shot. So, little fun tag on the end. Added some titles in there using the tools that are provided in Adobe Premiere. Render that out to 1080p, and which is pretty much the format of all the cameras that were being used, and pop up on YouTube, and away you go. So that was the entire process. I think we worked on it for probably about a week before all the materials were together. And the editing took me quite a bit of time, just because I had all these crazy cuts in here, constantly changing camera angles. Something to make something compelling. So I hope that's helpful, and I hope it's useful, and I hope somebody finds gets on with a project like this on their own, gives it a crack, and have some fun with it and good time, and maybe bring some joy to some other people who can't get out and see music right now. Yeah, so hang in there, stay safe, stay smart, people, please, and hopefully we'll see you soon.